Hello and buckle up as we prepare for takeoff. Welcome to the podcast where we discuss how to outmaneuver your opponents. I'm Faith and I'm here with Jrod, Cqrbon, and his Dudeness. All of us have been talking about and playing Star Wars Unlimited for about 6 months now, and we wanted to share our experience from our time with SWU. Well, most of the time, we have been playing Constructed, with the cards as they have been spoiled by FFG and fellow community members. We have recently also been playing and enjoying limited games of Unlimited. For those who may be new to trading card games, what is the difference between limited?
So the main difference between limited and constructed is in constructed, you're bringing a pre-constructed deck of cards that you've chosen, which in this game is 50 cards, maximum of 3. But in limited, however, you don't need any cards to go to a store to play. The store provides packs, and then you will choose cards from those packs to build your deck.
So, well, in constructed games, you can bring a deck that you have already built. In limited, you bring packs and make a deck out of the cards that you open from those packs. How do you play limited?
Well, the first format of limited most people will experience will be sealed, because sealed will be the format played at your pre-release. This will most likely be the first time people are playing with real cards. Sealed, you'll receive 6 packs of cards, open them all, and try to make the best 30-card deck you can make out of the cards drafted. At the pre-release, there will be some special rules that actually allow you to play Luke and Vader leader in these decks. Otherwise, any of the starter cards will not be in the limited pools. Sealed decks typically are lower power level than their draft counterparts, the other type of limited format. Drafting, which I personally prefer more, is you take 3 packs and you draft them all amongst up to 8 players in a pod. You pick one, you pass one, you end up with 45 cards, and you try and make the best 30-card deck again.
So we found out back in October the rarity breakdown and makeup of a booster pack, in which we learned that each pack contains a minimum of 1 leader, 1 base, 9 commons, 3 uncommons, 1 rare or higher, and 1 foil card, which can be of any rarity. On Wednesday, January 5th, 2024, FFG had a live stream in which they provided us with the official rules of how draft works. What is a quick summary of the draft rules from the FFG stream?
So each player is going to get 3 packs and open them. Then they're going to remove the leader and the common base that come with every pack without looking at the other cards in the pack. And they just set the bases aside, and then each player will end up with 3 leaders, and they'll have those in front of them. And so all other players at the table are able to see the leaders. Each player is going to choose a leader and pass their remaining leaders counterclockwise until each player has 3 leaders. And then starting with 1 pack at a time, each player is going to choose a card from that pack and then pass the remaining cards in the pack to the next player. For pack 1, this happens clockwise. For pack 2, this happens counterclockwise. And for pack 3, it goes back to clockwise. At the end of the draft, each player is going to have 42 cards total. And then you're going to build a minimum 30-card deck with one of their 3 leaders and any common base. If you drafted a rare base, you also have the option to use that as your base if you choose.
So you guys have had some experience playing limited, and in particular recently playing draft. What are your thoughts about draft and SWU in particular?
This is my first physical card game. I've played digital games before, but I haven't really had much experience with drafting before. So this has been a new kind of experience, a bit of a learning experience with me. So overall, I've enjoyed the system so far. One thing that I like a lot about this system is the aspect system, which is any card can go into any deck, but you pay 2 additional resources for each non-matching aspect. So for example, if you were playing a hero deck and you wanted to play a card, and you're playing hero with red, and you wanted to play a red villainy card, you could still play that card to your deck, but you'd have to pay 2 additional resources for it. And I really like how that system lends itself to draft. And normally in constructed gameplay, you don't want to play any cards outside of your aspects. But in draft, you have a lot more flexibility, and some cards you might actually be worth playing in draft for just 2 additional cost.
Yeah, the aspect penalty is their answer to other games being able to splash cards, right? In Magic the Gathering, you're playing draft. You can splash a third color, play 1 or 2 cards that are really good in that color. You just have to have the mana base for it. Here, there is no mana base, but you just have to pay 2 extra resources to do the thing you want. And most of the time, that's pretty good. One card I'm pretty high on right now that just was released is Strike True. It's a 3-cost single command aspect event that says deal damage to another unit equal to the power of one of your units. And I am pretty sure I'm okay paying 5 for that in most any deck in a limited environment.
Yeah, my biggest thing about the out of aspect thing in this game is it makes it really interesting and fun. Because similar to Magic, where you have colors, you kind of get to pick a color in that instance. But in other games like Lorcana, where the draft system is there is no penalty, you can just play whatever. It just comes down to just picking the best cards, and I think that's more luck involved than necessarily skill. Where this game, having the skill to understand what kind of aspects are open and which ones you should be pivoting to when you're picking cards and trying to stay open in the beginning and not like forcing into, a single aspect with like hero yellow or villainy green or anything like that.
I think that brings up a really good point. And what I can tell from with the aspect penalty rule or the extra aspect cost is you can really tell that Limited was in mind from day one as they've made this game. They thought about how are we going to account for the fact that there are these different colors, and we want people to have access to as many cards, but we want there to still be some kind of restriction. In Lorcana, their draft system is just you can pick any card and there's no penalty for it, and it loses the mirror that I think you can get with Constructed. In Magic, I feel like you're very kind of restricted because you need that land base in order to support, apart from special circumstances. So this fact that you can play all cards that you draft, but there's a penalty for it, I think is a great middle path.
And honestly, the best thing about that as well, you're mentioning the lands and the resources in this game, is that if you're at a point in the game where you can't play the card that's out of aspect for you, you can just resource it and it doesn't really become a large detriment. Whereas in Magic, if you have that card, it's usually a pretty powerful card. And if it's just sitting in your hand and there's no way for you to use it, it's kind of like a wasted card and it's basically not in your hand.
Exactly. Being able to resource any of the cards that you can't use is definitely a good thing. And there's oftentimes in Magic the Gathering where I would gladly pay 2 extra mana to cast the thing that I can't cast in my hand because I don't have the red or blue source or whatever. They definitely have put a lot of thought into draft, and in the handful of drafts I've done so far, I've had an absolute blast.
We did some testing and some practicing with ideas that we had thought draft was going to be like. So now that we have the actual rules, what are your guys' comparisons to what they've cooked up as the official rules and what we kind of were thinking they might have been?
So when we were starting to play, we had figured that you'd be allowed to choose any 30-point base you would like, as those are token bases. That was something we assumed. However, the thing that we got wrong was the leaders. We had kept them in the pack and drafted them while playing, and it kind of leaves a weird dichotomy of choices there where you have to either pick a card that you want to put in your deck or pick the leader you need to play. And sometimes if it's in the first pack and you have the leader that you want to play and you have a really great card for the deck, you're really forced to make a really difficult choice of like, do I just pick the leader that's obviously going to be always impactful or the one card that can really swing a game for me? And that is definitely a choice that felt bad for me when I was doing that initially.
Yeah.
And with their new rule of picking the leaders first and kind of giving you a direction, I really think that it adds a lot of depth into draft, but as well also makes it really easy for newer players who have not drafted yet. Because it gives them an easy, I have these leaders, I have to pick some of these colors, and that's what I'm going to do. So it also allows, with the 30-point basis, to pick, a lot of flexibility in the colors that you choose.
Yeah, and when we're playtesting the drafts before we actually know the rules, a very popular question, frequent question was, what if I don't draft a leader? Now with the rules as they are, there is zero chance you're never going to not draft a leader. So that simplifies that. And drafting the leaders at the start, I think, is an improvement because it allows you to know exactly what cards you can potentially play or not play, leaving you less ambiguity during the draft itself, making you able to just make better draft decks. So I'm enjoying it so far. It's cool.
Yeah, overall, I think I prefer the system of having the leaders first. As Dudeness said, it's like, especially for new players, they had mentioned in the stream, for new players, they might not end up with a leader if they draft really poorly, and that's not great. So I do like this system. There's a little bit of strategy aspect to it during the little like mini draft you do for the leaders. You can look to your side and see, what leaders you're potentially going to get past, right? That affects your choice now. So yeah, overall, I like this system that they've decided to go with for the leaders.
In one of the streams, they mentioned that one of the ideas they had originally was the leaders were actually 3 aspect. And so Luke, I don't know what they said for Luke, but Luke was blue-red heroism. And they over time came up with the base system separately. And that's something I've actually really enjoyed in the game, is that even though I have Leia as my leader, who is a green heroism leader, which when she can tap, she can let rebels attack. If my first pack I open has Obi-Wan in it, who's a vigilance hero or blue hero unit that is a 4/6 that can, when it's defeated, give experience counters to a unit and maybe let them draw a card, is that I can still run that. I'm not locked out of that. So the ability to have the base provide my second color or my last color, my third color, I think is a really interesting part of draft and in the game itself in deck building. It just allows for interesting choices. Also coming from the fact that you can take an out of aspect card in a game Flesh and Blood. In their draft system, as I understand, you pick a hero, you can't play certain spells, or certain spells can only be played by certain leaders. And in draft environment, that feels bad because I open my pack and the best card is different character's ability. I have to hate draft it and I can't use it at all.
Yeah, I also like in draft, speaking on the basis system, that you're just able to take any common base, just is always available to you when drafting, which leaves your options much more flexible and gives you a bunch of different routes to go, even with just only 3 leaders to choose from. Each of those leaders, right, could potentially be paired with 3 or 4 other aspects, depending on the cards you draft. So it gives you lots of potential to get creative with your draft and build something strong and unique.
From your guys' experience so far playing sealed and draft, what have you found has been important in helping you get better at limited in Star Wars Unlimited?
I'll say that, especially speaking as someone that is learning this new like style of play, of drafting and then playing with that deck. One of the things I'm learning to do is just kind of reading what other people are taking as the packs are being like passed around the table. That's something I've struggled with a little bit so far, but I'm sure it'll improve over time. But just like realizing, okay, I passed this pack around, it's come back around the table. I see a ton of villainy cards are gone. It seems like a ton of people are in villainy, and maybe I should, go more towards hero because I might have some better card selection because not as many people are building hero. So yeah, and it can end up in some weird situations. In a recent draft we did with 8 people, myself and 2 other people ended up with Jyn Erso as our leader and a blue base. We had 3 different of the 8 players, and so our decks were a lot lower quality compared to the other decks at the table. So yeah, but that's been something that I need to improve on, and definitely something a skill to hone.
Yeah, reading signals during the draft is one of the most important skills you can have in a draft. Realizing what's open, what's not open, especially in this game, you could peek at your left and right and see what leaders do they have. All right, what are they most likely going to want to? What are they going to be passing me potentially? So there's even an extra layer on the reading the signals and trying to anticipate what the person to your left and right might even be wanting in the first place.
So in looking to your left and right, in this game especially, you will know, at least to some degree, what they want. If you look to if you're passing to your left and you look, and the 3 heroes that they've picked all are villain leaders, for example, you know that they're not going to take a hero leader. If you get a really strong villainy card that you think they're going to play, how important do you think it is to take away their access to that rather than for you to take your own card? It's called hate picking, and some people will call it hate picking. So how would you guys rate that or value that?
Personally, I'm a big proponent of not hate drafting if there's something reasonable for your deck. So in the draft that Cqrbon had mentioned earlier, I was also a part of that 8-person draft. And in pack 3, I opened up Legendary Luke, the 6/7. When it enters battlefield, give -3/-3, or if a unit of yours has been defeated this round, give -6/-6 and has Restore 3. Obviously a very powerful card, and in 30 cards, you're going to see it in a lot of games. So if you can put it in your deck, you really want to put it in your deck. And if I was in Hero Blue or Villainy Blue, I probably would have picked it. But I was in Villainy Green and Villainy Red. So for me, it's going to cost 11 to play that card. It wasn't worth it. So I looked in the rest of the pack, and I saw that I had an Overwhelming Barrage, which is also an amazing card for draft. So for me, I was able to pull a card that was going to be very good for my deck. And yes, I did pass on a very powerful card, but also when you're playing draft, you're not playing every person in the draft, and you're not guaranteed to play the person that picks the great card. So you're better off making your deck better on average than trying to hurt someone else if there's a reasonable card in the pack for you to take. And for example, in the draft, Cqrbon ended up with the Luke, and I didn't even play Cqrbon, and I ended up winning that entire draft. So I personally don't believe that it should be that high of a priority, even if it's that good of a card. Now, to be fair, if that draft was in real life, I wouldn't have hate drafted that. I would have drafted it for my collection because that card's likely to be very expensive, and that's a whole different topic than this. But yes,
Just as a reminder, you should always rare draft
in real life.
in real life.
If you're drafting live, we're drafting on TTS right now, so none of the cards are actually real. We don't get to own them. So, yeah.
That being said, in my most recent draft I play, in my pack 3 pick 1, I opened up the Darth Vader unit, the 5/7 ambush boy that gets to search the top 10 cards of your deck and put up to 3 cost of villainy units into play. And I straight hate drafted that thing in a heartbeat because there wasn't anything else in the pack really for my deck. And the person to my left who I was going to pass it to was definitely in villain green. So your mileage may vary, but I generally agree that you shouldn't be hate drafting if there is a really good card for your deck in the pack with it.
In that draft you're talking about, were you in green already?
I wasn't green because I've drafted hero green every time.
So if since you were in green heroism, would it have been, or what would you have needed for, what kind of card would you have needed in order to put that in, even while denying someone else? I think with Vader's ability, him getting more villainy cards obviously wouldn't have been helpful in your deck. But let's say that you were running blue heroism, a blue villainy, and you got a Luke card. Would you consider playing that Luke in your limited deck, do you think?
I would pay 9 for Luke, yeah. 100%. But if there had been a Battlefield Marine to compete for that Darth Vader pack 3 pick 1, I would have taken the Battlefield Marine in a heartbeat. Because the 2-cost 3/3 generic unit is exactly what my deck needed and ended up being one of the reasons why I lost one of my meshes. Because I just didn't have that early game.
That's a good point. Well, in constructed, you can run all the best cards. In limited, you can only choose from the cards you open. Well, we don't have the full set yet. Of the 80% that we do have, which cards have been surprisingly successful for you in limited?
I'll just start off right off the bat and say Strike True is a great card. We got it spoiled on Wednesday. I already talked about what it does. It deals a damage to another unit equal to the power of your unit. These same type of spells in Magic the Gathering are typically really high quality and limited for the green color. And I do not see that being any different here in this. Because being able to pay 3 and just take out your opponent's unit, the really high value unit when it comes out, pretty good.
Yeah, I think these common rarity removal cards are gonna be quite good in draft. Obviously, you have things like Open Fire, which is just 3 cost red event that deals 4 to a unit. Is another example. Cards that are effective in limited specifically and not as much in constructed. I have gotten a lot of mileage out of just like basic units with the Sentinel keyword. So the Sentinel keyword basically forces your opponent to get rid of your Sentinel before they can attack your base or other units. Now, in constructed, Sentinel is a little bit less impactful because every deck has ways to just answer, to put it back into your hand, or just remove it efficiently. But in draft, Sentinel units are a lot more annoying to deal with and can force really unfortunate trades. So just units like System Patrol Craft, which is a blue space unit. It costs 4. It's a 3/4. It just has Sentinel. While it's not amazing in constructed, it's a lot better in limited. Another card in that vein is Vigilant Honor Guards. Is a 5 cost 4/6 blue hero with while this is not damaged, it has Sentinel. So you just put down a big pile of stats that's very difficult for them to answer, and it has Sentinel, and it can probably force some difficult trades for your opponent. So I really like just the Sentinel keyword in general, but also like pushes some of these cards further in limited than they're able to go in constructed.
Yeah, one of my cards that recently got spoiled as well that I really liked also happens to be in command. It's a 6 cost. It's mercenary company. It's a 5/5 that has ambush, which is after you play this unit, you may ready and attack an enemy unit with it. And the keyword overwhelm, it says when attacking an enemy unit, deal excess damage to an opponent's base. And this is a interesting combination of keywords because this is the only way to be able to attack an opponent's base without them having any time to react. Since if you kill something that's smaller than the 5 attack that this has, it'll hit the base instantly and the opponent has no chance to respond. Obviously, it's not the main factor why I think this card is good. I think if it didn't have it, I'd probably still play it as a 5/5 ambush. But this is definitely a card in limited that I've played recently, and it definitely outperformed what I thought it would when I initially picked it.
Yeah, I got that card played against me in my matchup against Tower, and it was pretty much the reason I lost. He would ambush it in, kill off one of my 4 attack boys. He would always live every time, deal damage to it, and it would be really hard for me to finish it off. It's almost a guaranteed 2-for-1, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that's usually a good thing to be doing. And I would rate that card very highly myself too, I think. Honestly, command in general just feels really good.
Yeah,
And in limited.
Ambush is similar to Sentinel, but ambush as a keyword in limited is very strong. Just being able to just from hand, because it's a form of removing something that your opponent has while also developing your own card, which is powerful in both constructed and limited so far. These
Even
small,
more so in limited, I think.
Yeah, and so these like small. These small units or medium-sized units with ambush can really put in a lot of work. Another example that's like Aussie Tuck Liberator Gunship, which is just a space unit. It's a 4 cost yellow hero. It's a 3/4 and it has ambush, which is not incredibly exciting, but in limited, it can put in a lot of work and very frequently is going to be able to defeat an enemy ship and survive to either fight another ship or start hitting the base for 3 damage every turn. So
Honestly, I think that card's a little underplayed right now, personally, which is mostly due to the fact that Sabine is the best yellow heroism deck right now, and she wants to be hyper aggro, and that card's not that. But if we get a deck that is more mid-rangey, which just means it's not super controlling, but still wants to take out and deal with their opponent's board, that unit will probably see more play. Because I still think it's a reasonable unit in space for 4, because 3/4 stat line for 4 is pretty reasonable, and the fact that it has ambush, being able to take out another space unit is pretty big.
Yeah, because most of the units played on turn 1 and turn 2 have 3 HP in space.
When listening to the cards that you guys have talked about, Trollcraft, Mercenary Company, Strike True, what I'm hearing in all these are just mono aspect cards. What do you find is the value of those mono aspect cards, in particular in limited? And what does a card need in order to be dual aspect, in order for you to consider taking highly in a draft, like a first pick kind of situation?
Okay, well, the single aspect cards are good because they're flexible, right? You can draft any single command card, and you can play that in either hero or villainy. And most of them, aside from a handful, are like good enough. You know, they're good enough to play, like solidly C tier at least. You know, it's just like, it's good enough. Fine, nothing amazeballs. That's fine. But I mean, that being said, I would still pick one, a bomb that was a dual aspect card over just a single aspect flexible card for sure, I think.
Yeah, when we first drafted with the rules where we didn't draft leaders first, I think the single aspect cards held more value early because staying open and flexible was significantly more important. But now that you have your leaders, you don't really feel bad about taking a card that's dual aspect if it's in a leader that you already have or something that you can splash in with the leader that you already have. So typically for that, if you take one heroism and one villainy leader, you can basically play any card you open initially.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is ideally the best thing. Sometimes it always doesn't work out that way. The way the packs all get opened, it's going to happen at some point. But ideally, you want to have a villainy and heroism unit leader, to be flexible. So you don't necessarily need to take these single aspect cards as highly. However, knowing that anyone at the table can take that card because it's single aspect is also a key factor in, do I want to risk this slightly better dual aspect card, or do I want to take this single aspect card that's more likely to be taken and it does not wheel back to me? And wheeling back to me is a draft term that basically means I take a card of the pack and there's enough cards in that pack where I will see that pack again. So I will have an opportunity to pick this card at a later time if nobody else decides to take it.
Wheel around the table, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important part about in limited, keeping yourself as open as possible at the very beginning of the game by having one of each leader in your you draft, one heroism, one villainy. That way you're as open as possible to the first pack. How long do you stay open for? And at what point are you going to commit and say, this is what I'm going to go with, and I'm going to, even if I open a great card from another color, I'm not in that, so I'm in this color.
So midway through pack 1, you can already start to see some signals. And if you see the signals in a color that you're not in, then it's definitely right to pivot to that color at that point as early as possible. That you can pivot, the better, right? And I'll pivot even as late as pack 2. Right, I'm in pack 2 and I start seeing a bunch of hero blue cards, and I get past like an Obi-Wan or a Redemption or something. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm in hero blue now.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how flexible you need to be. Because if you're in, like, let's say your first couple of picks were heroism, command, and hunting, right? And you had a couple of cards from each of those and you felt comfortable and you had a leader for it. So you know you can play both of those. And then you get past a great heroism blue card and you're like, there's not really much else in command or cunning for me at the moment. So I'm going to take this blue card. And then as the packs keep coming, the blue cards keep coming. You're like, okay, so now I'm going to pivot out of whichever other color to hop into heroism blue, right? But it's harder to do that going from heroism to villainy because those cards are significantly harder to transition into. Because if your first 5 picks are all heroism, and then you have somehow get an overwhelming barrage passed to you, which probably should never happen, but let's just say it does. Which overwhelming barrage is a 5-cost villainy command card that says give a unit +2/+2 and then deal damage equal to its power spread amongst your opponent's units however you please. So it's more or less a board wipe on a big unit. So it's probably a first pickable card in most instances at this point. But yeah, so unless it's something like that late and you're in heroism, you might not take that card if you're not in green for heroism. If you're in heroism green, you probably still take it for 7 because it's that good. But so I think it really depends on how flexible you need to be when to pivot. I think if you're in the same heroism or villainy aspect, I think it's okay to pivot as late as pack 2, like Dudeness said. But you really want to decide if you're heroism or villainy in pack 1.
You mentioned bombs, and in other games, there's certain acronyms like RED for bombs, removal, evasion, aggro, dirt. These things, these mantras, these acronyms, which help guide you and direct you in what your cards you're picking. Is there any mantras that you guys use, or any mantras you found helpful in Star Wars that maybe other games don't have?
I mean, I still loosely follow the bread thing, right? Like I'm still picking bombs first if they come to me, because that's what's going to have the most impact during a game. And after that, you should be picking as much removal, such as cards like Strike True or Open Fire or Vanquish, or even Maximum Firepower. Any of these removal cards are usually pretty good and limited, because you want ways to interact with your opponent's board. Although in this game, it's much easier to do that because you can directly attack your opponent's units. So circling back to talking earlier about ambush, that's essentially removal and a unit all turned into one. Ambush really is good in a limited environment. Cannot emphasize how good it really is.
Yeah, I like the point about interaction. From what I've seen so far, that definitely has been very important in draft. Is these both the removal, the ambush, sentinel, different ways to either shut down something that your opponent's trying to do, or to further your own advantage. I definitely agree that cards that provide interaction are especially important in this game.
Hugely important.
Yeah, and it's funny that Dudeness brought up maximum firepower, because in the most recent draft that we did, I got one. It was like pack 1, and it was third to the last card in the pack, and I'm just like, how is this card still here?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest, like I took it and I was like, because this card's insane. Like there's times where I will consider that card in like the first 3 picks. So the fact that I got it that late in the pack is just crazy to me. I mean, granted, there was one Boba Fett player to my left, which in Boba Fett is a little bit worse because you're likely playing less Imperials. So like that kind of made sense. And there wasn't really many other villainy drafters. So I think that was just a luck of everyone playing heroism.
Yeah, for sure.
But
yeah, I was going to say, I think that's more an indication of there's not a lot of villainy players at the table if a single aspect villainy card is making it that late, especially one that I think is at least B tier in draft.
Well, it seems like we're out of time for this episode. We'll have to wait until next week for Cqrbon's Chewbacca Corner segment. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Twitter. Links will be in the description. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Outmaneuver.